Hello, welcome, and thanks for joining me for another book chat. Today, let's spend a little bit of time with The Will to Battle by Ada Palmer. This is book 3 in the Terra Ignota series by Ada Palmer. I have previously read book 1, Two Like the Lightning, and book 2, Seven Surrenders, and I chatted both of those, and I will link down to those chats below if you're interested in hearing more about the previous 2 books in this series of what I understand is going to be 4 books. The 4th book is due out next year, I believe. So, The Will to Battle. This book was originally published back in December of 2017, so I've been wanting to read it actually since then, and I'm so glad I finally got around to reading it. I finished up and chatted the 2nd book of the series, Seven Surrenders, just not long ago, so this was really fresh in my mind because this is, and it's a good thing because this world is pretty complicated. I referred in the last video about how I needed to actually use the Wikipedia article on the Terra Ignota series because there's so many characters and there's so many different types of things to keep up with. We are in the first book took place over a few days, the end of March in the year 2454, so we're about 400 years in the future. The second book picked up right after that and covered about the last week in March of 2454, and then this one picks up a little bit later. It starts in April, about the first week in April, and it goes all the way to August of 2454. So really it's a relatively short amount of time, but what's happening in this time is that the world is I'm not going to go a lot into the world because I've talked about it a lot in the previous 2 videos. So the difference, just to summarize though quickly, is we do not have nation-state system of government anymore in this 400 years in the future. The world is divided up into what are called hives, and these are governmental type organizations. They are not dependent on geography at all, and people willingly join them. You can join any hive that you want to. There's 7 main hives, and then there's some lawless hives, the hiveless people. You don't have to join a hive at all. You can join other sorts of governmental structures as well. So there's a lot of personal freedom in this world of the future, and it's been a very stable and a very peaceful world until things start to break down in book 1. They really start to go awry in book 2, and The Will to Battle in book 3 actually has an interesting title. The title is actually really interesting. So The Will to Battle, there's the cover again. But there's a quote at the very beginning of the book. It says, "For war consisteth not in battle only, or the act of fighting, but in a tract of time, wherein the will to contend by battle is sufficiently known, and therefore the notion of time is to be considered in the nature of war as it is in the nature of weather." So that's actually a quote from the Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes. And so Thomas Hobbes, the philosopher, sort of political philosopher, figures really quite prominently in this book as a sort of ghost figure. The narrator refers to Hobbes, and Hobbes comments sometimes on the action, which I'll explain a little bit more here in a bit. But yeah, so I didn't want to go into so much about the world building, although it is fascinating. And at the end of this chat, I think I'll wrap up this chat by some musings that I've been having about which of the hives that I would have joined. So I'll wrap up the chat with that in a bit. But let's just talk a little bit more about what's going on in this world. So like I mentioned, we are in April at this point of 2454 and the previous 2 works. What has happened is there's these 2 miracle children. I referred to them in the 2nd video for Seven Surrenders. One is kind of a miracle child. I'm calling it a miracle child. I don't want to give a lot away about this child because it was sort of uncovering that has been part of the interest that kept my interest of the book. And then there's another who's a young man. He's not really a child, but he's another sort of extra, kind of almost extra human type person, young man. And so these 2 figures figure really prominently in the 2nd book and definitely also in the 3rd. there's this book is a history, so it's written as like it's a history. It's a history being written though in 2454, so it's being written. Histories are written for the future mostly, right? They're written for people in the future to understand what happened in the past. However, this history we're reading it from the past, and so histories take a lot of things for granted, don't they? So they take for granted when a history is being written today, for example, they may be referring to things like phone calls and things like this. A person from 400 years ago, which is how far in the past distant we are from the action of this novel, 400 years ago, referring to just things casually like phone calls, or even concepts like gays or transgenders and things like this, that we would all understand that sort of background. And so we might shorthand it, we might not explain it in our history. And so to a person reading it from 400 years ago, they might not quite know what to make of it. Some of it might seem magical in the sense of these two this one miracle child and then miracle young man. I'm not exactly sure, because I'm reading it from my perspective as a 21st century person as opposed to a 25th century person. So anyway, that part's kind of really interesting to me. There was I don't want to give a lot of spoilers away because, the book would be spoiler driven because there's a lot of political intrigue, there's a lot of machinations that go on, and there's also just part of the fun of finding out, what is this all about? Different aspects of the different characters and the leaders of the different hives and the members of the hives. And so I don't want to destroy, I don't want to be any kind of impair that enjoyment of reading at all. So I won't give away any kind of spoilers, but there is something that occurs. There's a statement. It's really just like one sentence at almost the end of this novel that makes me think that I understood that not everybody's human anymore quite like I understand it. I also understood that, the first thing I understood was genders don't mean the same thing. It took me a while to pick up on this, that genders, they don't, this is not explicitly explained in the book, but over time with reading through the different, all three of the books, I have come to understand that, gender there's a different understanding of gender in the future, and so during this time. And so I think there's also a different understanding of human, what's particularly human, all the way. And I'm really anxious for the fourth of books, because I'm hoping this maybe sheds a little more light on this. So another about this, because I think that maybe might be where we're going, that I'm coming to understand now that not everybody that I've thought of as sort of basically human really are human. There are some pretty wild things that end up happening because of this miracle. One of the miracle children seems to have what I perceive as magical powers. So I'm not exactly sure still what's going on with that, but I have a few clues that I won't mention right now. But all right, so another kind of really interesting, I think, aspect of the book, other than this this sort of idea of genders doesn't mean the same thing anymore, that what we think of, that took me a while to figure out, I don't think human now, what it means to be human. And then also one puzzling thing for me always through the book has been the narrator. The narrator, and this won't really give away any spoilers because this is revealed really early on in book one, is the narrator is a criminal. And so he is what's called a servicer, and I explained this in the previous videos if you want to know what a servicer is. But he is a horrible criminal. He is like a criminal. He's like a Jeffrey Dahmer criminal. I mean, he's a bad dude, or he has done really bad things. That's what I should say, is he has done some really bad things. And he's been our narrator all through these books. He is also the narrator in book 3, in this book, but he's kind of losing it at this point because he refers to the reader sometimes. He has dialogue with his future readers, with us, what we're reading from the past, but he's reading, he will refer to the reader as, of course you might already know this, he'll say to the reader, because of course he's expecting them to be reading the book with hindsight instead of us reading it, is part of the past. But so why he's portrayed this way, I figure there must be a better reason than I've been able to figure out so far. But it does add an odd sort of layer to the storytelling to have this type of narrator. Relatively unreliable, really kind of going off and losing it, having these dialogues also with Thomas Hobbes in this period. So yeah, it's just kind of cool in that regard. Let's see, what else was I going to say? Terra Ignota. So the Terra Ignota series, that's finally explained in this novel about why it's called Terra Ignota. So this whole series, the book itself is called The Will to Battle, but the series is called the Terra Ignota series by Ada Palmer. And Terra Ignota is referring to, there's a trial that's going on. So the action pauses between the end of book 2 and this book. The action pauses because the Olympics are going to happen, and so the different governments of the different hives of the world pause the will to battle, pause this sort of cascade of chaos, and rush to what appears to be the first war in human history in several hundred years. And so all that action gets paused for the Olympics, and the Olympics are being held in Antarctica at this time, but which is kind of interesting. But there's a trial that's also going on because of some things that were uncovered started in book 1, but were uncovered in book 2, that caused a worldwide scandal that's actually destabilized the entire world. And one of the actors in that action is being tried. And so the trial, his legal defense is called Terra Ignota, which means unknown land. And so the basis of that is he's arguing that he admits that he did what he's accused of doing, but it's unknown whether or not that's actually against the law. It's unknown land, and it could have who knows what kind of consequences, because it's something that the structures of the hives have not built into their systems yet. And so, that's kind of an interesting thing to me too, how the hives, I've taken away from all 3 of these books, how things can change, and societies have to change and have to evolve, and so they hit different pressure points and people react to it differently, and how quickly sometimes things can totally unravel, which is what's happening at least in these first 3 books of this series, Terra Ignota. But anyway, that explains the Terra Ignota series. It means unknown land. It's referring specifically in this book to this particular court case, but I think its overall meaning is that this what's happening to the world and how it's about to change is unknown to those living in the book as well as to us, the reader. So yeah, that's kind of cool. So before I run out of time, though, I just wanted to mention about the hives. So the hives I explained in the earlier videos, so I won't go into them here, but it's sort of like the Harry Potter sorting hat, where everybody, you get to choose your hive when you become an adult. So I've been thinking, which hive would I be? So I've realized I have this idealized idea of myself, and then I have what's basically the reality. So my idealized self, I think, would be a utopian. These are really future-oriented people. They're trying to colonize Mars. They're terraforming Mars. Their capital's on the moon. Their goal is to expand humanity out into the rest of the solar system and beyond. And my idealized self would be a utopian, but in reality, I'd probably be a cousin. The cousins are a hive that focuses on good works like they run the hospitals, most of the hospitals, the public libraries, schools, the kind of social benefit things. And I'd be probably more of a natural fit among the cousins, but my idealized self thinks, but you should be a utopian. But yeah, so I think I'll stop the chat with that. I will pick up book 4 when it comes out next year at some point. I want to try to get it read right away because this world is somewhat complicated and I want it to be fairly fresh in my mind. So my next book chat is going to be A Secret History of Christianity by Mark Vernon. Jesus, the Last Inkling, and the Evolution of Consciousness. The last inkling that's being referred to here is Owen Barfield, who was friends with none other, in the Inkling group of Oxford, along with J.R.R. Tolkien and also C.S. Lewis. So Owen Barfield, some really interesting ideas in here of Barfield's as well as Mark Vernon's about Christianity and reading it in a different way. And so I've already finished this. This chat should be coming up fairly soon. So until next time, take care. Bye.